All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So, obviously, earlier this morning, we had the breaking news that the New England Patriots and, man, legendary coach Bill Belichick are parting ways. It was actually crazy to read that, although a lot of people probably saw that coming. But now this opens up a lot of questions, right? Where do the New England Patriots go from here? Who are they going to be bringing in? Where does Bill Belichick end up? There's a lot of different questions, but I will say this. If you need a head coach this seems to be the year where if you need a head coach, there's plenty of options. Like take your choice, right? You have like young up and comers, you have the guys that have been head coaches before but maybe not have worked out for one reason or another. You have veteran coaches that have had success in the NFL. I think really wherever direction you look, you can go out and land a solid head coach. I mean, to quickly go down the list of candidates here, just the ones that are popping into my head as I'm making this video: Antonio Pierce, Mike Vrabel, Pete Carroll, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn is getting a lot of looks, Brian Flores from Minnesota, Eric Bieniemy is now technically out there. Who else? Gerard Mayo, Harbaugh from Michigan. He's probably the biggest name out there right next to Bill Belichick. So, I guess when we talk about what direction the Patriots will travel down, I think, the obvious name stands out: Mike Vrabel, the former Patriot, right? He can slide in easily to the Pats organization and know the culture, know how they do things there. He already has a relationship with Kraft, the owner. A defensive guy, somebody who preaches toughness. I hate that I'm saying this because Mike Vrabel is one of my favorite coaches, if not my favorite NFL head coach in the league. If he goes to New England, that is going to have to change. It's going to have to change, obviously. But, he kind of coaches football, specifically like in the trenches, defensive football, the personality, the attitude, the identity of the football team reminds me a lot of like the teams that I grew up watching in those early to mid 2000s, where it's like toughness and hard-nosed defense and whatnot. He kind of reminds me of that old school, that old school mentality, probably because he was a really good player in that time, as well as Antonio Pierce is somebody else who kind of brings that same approach. Talk about commanding respect immediately, turning around the culture immediately. You don't see superstar players, Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, so outspoken about keeping an interim head coach who lost a couple of games during a stretch there. Pierce is just another guy who I would personally love, on my team. But again, when we look at New England's perspective, Mike Vrabel to me should be the top choice. Again, all the connections with New England, has playoff success. He essentially ended the Brady-Belichick dynasty, beating them in the playoffs. As well as Mike Vrabel having a ton of success with Tennessee, right? Making it work, building those offensive lines, having all the success with, guys like Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and whatnot. I think, when we look at Vrabel's body of work, he could go out and get a job anywhere. And, like throughout an NFL team, yeah, they should have interest in Mike Vrabel. Like, he's that good of a head coach. And again, I hate that, we're talking about him regarding the New England Patriots, but it is the truth here. I definitely could see something like that playing out. Obviously, Gerard Mayo's in-house, and he has been getting head coaching, looks. There has been buzz building with Mayo, around the NFL. Supposedly, he's going to be a head coach one day. Maybe it's his time now with the New England Patriots. And also, real quick side note on Mike Vrabel, and this goes for New England or wherever Vrabel ends up, probably not Atlanta. But if Vrabel gets a job and the team needs a quarterback, so like cross the Chargers out of it, and probably Washington too, because they have like a top 2 pick. But if Vrabel gets a job somewhere and that team needs a quarterback and they maybe have offensive struggles, I could definitely see Vrabel stepping in as head coach, Arthur Smith, who was just fired from Atlanta, stepping in as OC, working directly with Vrabel, because those guys were teamed up back in Tennessee, and then going out and getting Ryan Tannehill as a cheap 1-year stopgap type of, bridge quarterback for that one season. So, when we are talking about New England, I could see that scenario playing out. Of course, though, they do have the number 3 pick, so whatever, it's just kind of diving too deep down the rabbit hole here. But in any case, what direction do the Patriots go? Again, unfortunately, there are tons of quality coaches out there, so we'll see what happens. As far as Belichick goes, I mean, there's been rumors all over the place. A lot of people have, early on in the process, like during the season, we're talking about the LA Chargers being a potential fit because they're like, quote unquote, win now. They already have a franchise quarterback. But then there were some concerns about like Bill Belichick at 72, like packing up and moving across the country to LA for just a couple of seasons. Cause you're envisioning a short-term tenure here, not like another 10 years with the Chargers here or anything like that. Washington was talked about, but Washington, although I think the Washington job is pretty interesting because not only do they have pieces, young pieces, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Curl, Forbes, the number 2 overall pick, the second pick in every following round after rounds 2, 3, 4. I think Washington is super, super intriguing, and they also have a new owner, right? So there could be that jump start from ownership, like, hey coach, whatever you want, here it is. Essentially somebody who's going to green light a lot of different things to make it work early on in the process, because nobody wants to buy an NFL team and then just rebuild for 5 years and never see 500, never see the light of day for 4 or 5 seasons. Nobody, especially like these billion-dollar owners, nobody wants to go down that process. So I think Washington is interesting. Carolina, I just don't envision Bill Belichick going to, although I feel like with Tepper, he could maybe sell out, pay a ton, and all those types of things. But Atlanta is the team that a lot of people have been talking about over the last 24, 48 hours here. And it makes sense because Atlanta, much like the Commanders and Chargers, they have a lot of win now pieces. They have a lot of young athletic skill position players, which is something that New England did not have. It really is a question of the quarterback position, right, for the Atlanta Falcons. And again, there's going to be a lot of different options, potentially Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, again, as that 1 year stopgap. In this day and age, we're talking about, potentially a quarterback being moved, right, like a top end quarterback getting traded. And then, of course, the draft, right, where the Falcons do have the 8th overall pick. So Atlanta is super, super interesting here. And I feel like as of right now, I would probably say that the smoke is real there. And also another benefit, that division is wide open. Tampa, New Orleans, Carolina, Atlanta. Next season, I could see any one of those teams, maybe outside of Carolina, winning it, right? Especially if Belichick steps into that Falcons. I mean, Atlanta had a chance, I think literally came down to the last week of the season. So, they're right there. They are right there. So it'll be interesting to see how everything kind of plays out over these next few days. But I wanted to end the video off with, just something a little fun, just, some speculation here. And that's, I got to be honest, looking at all of these different head coaching candidates, all of these, really, really good head coaching options out there on the market, it kind of makes you think, as personally as a Jet fan, there are coaching question marks with Saleh. Is he the right guy? There's coaching question marks with Nathaniel Hackett. And now Keith Carter is coming into the mix where players are, calling him out on social media. It kind of makes you think, if the Jets did make a move this offseason, what direction, would you go down as far as all these potential options? I mean, because again, there's so many names out there. Harbaugh, Pete Carroll, although Pete Carroll's probably expected to stay with Seattle. But Vrabel, I mean, man, the list goes on. Raheem Morris from the Rams. Like, there's so many guys that can step in and I feel like put together a quality interview and, move along in the process, the head coaching process. I think for me, though, if the Jets ended up moving on from Saleh and they had a choice between all these different guys, one guy that I feel like would make so much sense is Dan Quinn. Because Dan Quinn, for a multitude of reasons. Number one, Dan Quinn has been a head coach before, most importantly. Right, he had success in Seattle as a coordinator. He goes to Atlanta, had success there as a head coach. And then obviously we're seeing what he's doing in Dallas. This guy knows ball. Dan Quinn knows ball. He's a leader. I really, really respect how he continues to stay in Dallas because he's searching for that perfect job. He's not just taking anything that, he can get. He's I feel like there's a real calculated approach with what Dan Quinn is doing, but he knows ball. He's been a head coach before. I think that is huge. He has a Super Bowl appearance. Another benefit as well is that he runs a similar defense to Robert Saleh. So the roster turnover wouldn't really take all that long. It's not like, all right, guys, 2 years, we have to rebuild this thing through the draft. No, a lot of the pieces are just plug and play into Dan Quinn's system. So I feel like we would have a lot of, like a quick jump start there compared to a lot of head coaches around the league, ingratiating themselves with, their new rosters respectively. So I think from that aspect, it makes a ton of sense. He's from New Jersey, which I think is really cool, Morristown to be exact. I think a hidden benefit as well is that Jeff Ulbrich would probably remain on staff. If you look at where Jeff Ulbrich came from, he came from Atlanta under the Dan Quinn coaching tree. So I think, boom, you'd have your defensive coordinator in place, somebody who already knows the team. Somebody who already is producing at a really, really high level, somebody who's actually calling the defense. So now the question turns to, okay, who's going to be the offensive coordinator? And Dan Quinn, throughout his time in the NFL, again, Seattle, Atlanta, Dallas, in that specific order, holding top end jobs, he has connections, right? In Atlanta, he was able to bring in Kyle Shanahan as offensive coordinator. And granted, this was before Kyle Shanahan became the Niners head coach, but, I would have faith in Quinn to find that offensive mind, right? As opposed to just taking like shots in the dark. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Where do you think Bill Belichick will wind up? What do you think the Patriots will end up doing? Brian Flores, potentially. I mean, he's doing some good things with Minnesota's defense, obviously came from the Belichick tree. Gerard Mayo, I think, is an interesting candidate, but I think in the end, no surprise here. It's not, anything crazy. I do think it'll probably be Mike Vrabel getting that job, and then maybe Arthur Smith stepping in as OC. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, go Jets.